Cool. All right. Well, thank you all for
Okay.
joining. This is our first kickoff of 2025. It's technically our second kickoff of this user group. We tried to we had a session last year, and then we tried to kick off some other sessions, but we had some technical support difficulties with trying to get this off the ground. So we're kind of doing a re-kickoff this year, and we've got two really great speakers that are both AEM champions. As well as Wilson and I are also AEM champs. So you got a whole group of AEM champs on this call. And let's get into it. Wilson, if you want to go to the next slide. So just a little heads up in case you're interested in other AEM user groups as well. You can use that QR code or that web link to get there. Obviously, the one that you're on today is the one on the left, but there's another user group meeting that is going to be coming up around metadata and AEM assets with Gen AI. So definitely check that out on May 15th if you're interested. If you want to go to the next slide. So Wilson and I are your user group chairs. My name is Mary Alice. I work at Alliance Bernstein on the client group team. We are in financial asset management, and I oversee digital product management. So working on AEM, Marketo, Adobe Target, etc. I'm a two-time champ and was an Adobe Summit speaker last year. I might also be this year. We'll be talking about that at the end. And we'll have some sessions that we'll be talking to you guys about that you need to be on the lookout for. With that, I'll pass it off to you, Wilson.
Hey guys, I see some names and faces on the list already. That's good. So my name is Wilson Faure. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. And for folks that are joining, please put on the chat where you're located. So I've been an Adobe champion also for 2 years. And I spoke at the summit last year. I was a finalist of the Experience Maker Awards last year, and then bringing this event together so we all can share some knowledge, bringing some good people. But I work at Cox Communications. I'm director of digital marketing platforms, all the AEM and the back end and cloud infrastructure for our site. Okay.
Awesome. As well as the user group stuff, there's also some other AEM opportunities of other events that you can join. So you can check out like Espresso's an experience manager, or some of the success webinars. So if you want to learn more about that stuff, definitely check out the links on this slide. Just some quick house rules that we want to make sure that we include as we move forward. So there's no self-promotion or pitching of any kind on these events. So just know that when you're chatting in the chat. Don't contact people outside of the user group without their consent, please. Yeah, that's basically it.
And then this is more for the fact that we're trying to make this a user group, not a sales speech, and not a place where no company will be selling their services, and we want here to be a sharing experience and for folks to learn, and not even Adobe to try to sell anything. So this is a user group, is not a sales presentation. So the idea is for us to share knowledge here.
We've already talked about this, but this is just, again, the note on the recording. So if you have any questions after this and anything that you want to know more about the user group, or if you have any ideas for our user group, definitely reach out to me or Wilson via our emails on this slide.
And then another last thing before we get to the actual presentation and the good stuff is there's instructions on the user group, but the reason I ask about the locations, we're doing this virtual, but hopefully we can do one of those in person. I've been to some of the Marketo ones here in Atlanta, and they are very active, and it is very good to have those presentations in person. So let's see what we can cover here on this one.
Yeah, so basically, if you want to, again, know more about user groups, this is just another page that has like our actual chapter link, so you can go and check that out. But you can also get signed up in Bevy and check out kind of just how the user groups work. So.
And the stars of the day.
Yes, so we have some really great speakers today. We've got Daniel and Angel that are speaking respectively on caching performance and forms. So I'm not going to take a lot more time to go into all of this. I'm going to let them kind of introduce themselves, but Daniel is going to kick off first. So Daniel, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you very much. So let's get started with our first topic. So short introduction from my side. So I'm joining actually from this call from Europe, from a beautiful small country, Croatia, in Central Eastern Europe. And I'll be doing a talk on caching in AEM as a cloud service. So why this topic? Because it's one of, never-ending discussion topics we have on every AEM project, and it is a very technical topic, but I will try to keep it on a level that hopefully everyone can follow, even if you are like an editor or a project owner or any other not so technical or developer role. Because I think it's really important topic for everyone to understand, right? It's, of course, caching is implemented by developers, but it has a lot of consequence, like how it's implemented has a lot of consequence, also how the editors can work with AEM. So first of all, why we even do caching? It's very simple. So we need it because we mostly use AEM to create websites that have a lot of traffic, like enterprise websites. And we want to optimize efficiency, also end user experience, and caching is simply something we need to get a website performing optimally worldwide. What is interesting in AEM as a cloud service is that we have several layers of caching, and this is what makes the whole topic quite complex and hard to understand and set up efficiently. So let's go through them, and we'll go through them in more detail. So this is just the introduction. So basically we have AEM Publisher, we have Apache and Dispatcher and CDN, and then of course something not to forget is the end user browsers that also does caching. So on this slide you can see like an overview of how it looks, but we'll go through each of these layers in more detail. On the right side, you see AEM Publisher, and basically most of the time we don't do caching on AEM Publisher, but we do define certain rules, headers that then instruct other layers how to perform caching. In AEM as a cloud service, every AEM Publisher pod, because they of course scale and you have several pods probably on your production instance, has its own Apache/Dispatcher instance. So basically what Apache or the Dispatcher model, what they do local caching close to AEM, and it can be based on two types of caching. So either based on TTL or invalidation. And again, I'll explain in more details. Then you can have two scenarios in terms of CDN. So either you decided to use the Adobe's out-of-the-box CDN, or you decided to bring your own CDN. It doesn't make a lot of difference in terms of caching. So most CDNs do caching close to the user. So it's a distributed network of servers close to the user, and most of them use TTL invalidation, so based on some expiration time. But of course, you can also do custom invalidation, which is maybe not so popular, but also an option for the CDN layer. And then in the end, of course, every browser has its own local cache, and that's something we can't forget. So the TTL headers that we set will come to the browser and will also get cached on every user's device. And for the user devices, of course, we don't have an option to clear that cache. So we need to really think about the whole architecture and all layers when we talk about caching. All right, next slide, please. Okay, before we dig into caching in more detail, I will be mentioning a couple of cache headers. So I just wanted to call out a few of them before we dig in more details. By the way, there are far more cache headers than listed here, but here I listed the 4 that we will focus on in this talk, because there are too many to talk about all of them in this short session. So what you need to be familiar with for this session is the most important cache header we'll be mentioning is cache control. And cache control is a response header, so a header that AEM publisher will return on every request, if you set it, of course, that defines caching policies for all the other layers. And this includes the browser, the CDN, and everything you got in between AEM and the end user. And basically what it does, it allows developers to specify for how long a certain resource, like an HTML page or an image, will be cached on those caching layers. Very similar to that, there is a surrogate control header. It's the same as cache control, but it's intended only for intermediary caches. Like, for example, you can use it to only set certain TTL for the CDN, but not for the other layers. Similar story is with expires. So it serves the same purpose as cache control. The only difference is it defines an exact date and time after the resource should be considered invalid. So not X minutes, but exact date and time. And finally, and the most interesting header I want to mention is eTag, because I saw not so many projects using this, and I think it's super useful. This is basically a header that provides like a unique ID for every response from AEM publisher. So basically, if you have an HTML page, it will return like the hash value of the content of that page. So whenever a content changes, you will get a new eTag value. So it's very simply generated from AEM. But why would we use it? Because it can save you a lot of network traffic. So both CDNs and the browser can send conditional requests. So when a browser, for example, wants to check if a fresh version of a page is available on the CDN, it sends a request. If an eTag is set, it's going to put the eTag in the if non-match header. And then if that value matches the value on the CDN, for example, or AEM instance, wherever you're sending your request to, then if the content hasn't changed, the CDN or AEM can respond with a 304 instead of 200. And why is this important? Because 304 means you already have the fresh content. There is no need for me to send you the updated content. And if you see, it's a small on the screenshot, but this response is measured in bytes. So you can see how many traffic we actually save by not sending the same response a second time, because we know, based on this if non-match header, that the browser already has the latest version, and there is no need to send the same HTML or the image again to the browser if it's the same version that it already has cached locally. So with that short intro to short headers, let's move on with the caching layers, and we'll start with the first layer, and that's the AEM publisher. And I'm talking about cache layers here, and I do mention AEM publisher, which is not a caching layer. So it's, of course, meant to serve content as the origin server. However, I think what everyone should be aware of, also non-developers, is that there could be certain types of caching done on the AEM publisher as well. And we see this very often on AEM projects, that development teams implement certain in-memory caching strategies. For example, we can cache objects in Java. We can cache maybe query results or even certain component outputs. We store it in the RAM memory of the server to optimize performance, to not like do certain calculations multiple times. And with this approach, we can improve response times, but we need to be really careful, right? Because we can also confuse our end users and editors if we don't clear that cache properly. Even though AEM itself is not meant to be used as a cache, it is basically controlling how content is cached in all the upper layers that I mentioned. So this includes dispatcher, CDN, web browsers, and anything you have in between. These caching policies are basically really simple to define, because it's mostly based on HTTP standards. And the headers that I mentioned, like the cache control, expires, eTag, however you set them, or however your development team sets them on the AEM publisher, that's basically going to be respected on all the other cache layers. because mostly we don't do customizations on CDN, on the browser, right? So these behave based on the HTTP standard, and they will follow the directives or the cache headers that you forward to them from your AEM publisher instance. All right, but the next layer we will a little bit deeper is Apache. Apache, of course, with the dispatcher module. Dispatcher is just a module that gets installed with Apache and knows how to deal with AEM sites, basically. And as I mentioned already, like every AEM publisher pod running on AEM as a cloud service will have its own Apache server and a dispatcher module. And the idea is, of course, to manage traffic efficiently, like cache as much as you can. Don't send every request to AEM, but handle what you can handle through the cache. Basically, it offloads AEM publisher by being able to handle some of the requests locally. Maybe you've seen this image on the right side. I won't explain it because it's very, very simple, like caching. Do you have something in the cache? Has it expired? Yes, no. Deliver what's in the cache or ask AEM to get you the fresh content. That's basically the whole story, how the dispatcher caching works. But of course, it's not so simple. So if we can go to the next slide. Basically, there are certain rules that you need to know about dispatcher and how it works. And certain rules are just out of the box in dispatcher, and other rules we can set and customize by ourselves or with our development teams. By default, dispatcher will always forward every request to AEM that falls under these conditions listed here. So if it's not a GET request but a POST request, it's gonna end up on your AEM instance. If you have a URL with no extension, again, it's going to be forwarded. Or if you include any query parameters, if the response code is anything else than the family of 200, or if you explicitly put response headers like dispatcher no cache or cache control no cache, this basically instructs dispatcher not to cache anything and bypass it to AEM. Or of course, you can configure dispatcher yourself. You can have certain rules, either by path or patterns or MIME types to define what you want to cache and what you don't want to cache. But if it's a standard GET request with an extension with no query parameters, like a request to an HTML page or like a CSS or JavaScript file, then dispatcher is gonna cache it, and then we need to look into how this content gets invalidated in time, which is, I think, on the next slide. And basically, there is one configuration that makes a big difference in how dispatcher caches content, and it's just very simple flag where you can either enable or disable TTL. And when TTL is disabled, then dispatcher basically caches content indefinitely. Well, of course, not indefinitely, but until it receives a cache flush or cache invalidation request, which is in AEM as a cloud service triggered and working completely out of the box. So whenever an editor publishes a page, besides the standard distribution of that content from AEM author to AEM publisher, a cache flush, dispatcher cache flush request will also be sent, and dispatcher knows that it needs to clear the cache for that specific page. It's usually not so simple that we clear only one page, but we have a setting that's called stat file level, and that's actually pretty hard to explain, but I'll give it a try in just a few seconds. So basically, this is one configuration where we define how many levels of folders in the cache structure should we clear when an invalidation request happens. So basically, when you do a page publication on certain level, so you have your probably like site page, then you have like a market, the language, and then some sections, and then finally your page. So usually on dispatcher, we would invalidate, like, the most common setup is to invalidate like the whole language tree if one of the pages changes, because of course there are links between the pages, etc. So that's usually like the safe setting that we use on many implementations. However, when we do enable TTL, nothing is going to happen by just enabling TTL. So it's going to work exactly the same, unless you also specify TTL cache headers. Then Dispatcher starts to change its behavior. And Dispatcher, if TTL is enabled, and if you set a cache control header, for example, and you say that your content should be cached for 5 minutes, then Dispatcher is going to respect that cache header. It's going to set a specific expiration time. So basically every 5 minutes, it will request a new version from AEM, even if no publication requests happened. However, it's still gonna invalidate the cache on every author publication. So it can work like with both of these settings, and it works really well. So I highly recommend to enable TTL, because it doesn't make any difference unless you set the cache headers where you want to set them. So it's really useful to combine these two options where you need them. All right, I think we can jump to the next one, which is CDN. I hope everyone is at least familiar what CDN is. It's basically a network of distributed machines all over the world. So there are certain providers that offer these services so that we can cache our content close to our end users. So for me, probably in Europe, when I visit adobe.com or whatever website, I would probably get served from a server close to me, right? And it would be a different server for you guys in US. The whole point is to, of course, improve performance and offload traffic, same as Dispatcher, but in this case also reduce latency, because you get the content close to you. So let's see how caching works on CDN and cache invalidation on the next slide. Basically, most often, although not a rule, but most often the CDNs are invalidated using TTLs, because it's basically a very simple and straightforward approach to set up and maintain. But also it has one consequence, because if you use TTL, then that means when you do content changes in AEM, you publish them, it will not be immediately reflected on the CDN, which means that your end users will not immediately see the changes. If your TTL is 5 minutes, then maybe they will see it in 3, 4, or 5 minutes, depending on when the CDN last cached that specific web page. There is, of course, another way to do it, and mostly every CDN vendor offers a cache purging API. So it works same as with Dispatcher. You can send a request to the CDN and say, hey, please clear the cache for this specific page or this specific set of pages. And of course, this method is a little better because your end users are immediately served with new content, but it's also much more difficult to implement because this one doesn't unfortunately work out of the box, even if you use Adobe's CDN. So Dispatcher will clear cache, its cache on every publication, but CDN won't, at least not out of the box. So you would need to implement this yourself. And I've seen projects that have done that completely, like using invalidation. And my personal opinion is that it's an overkill because it's a lot of work and you probably don't need it for every page. So actually, my recommendation would be to use this where you need it for pages that really need fresh content to be delivered as soon as possible to the end users. And next slide, please. Yeah, regarding CDN, you can, or many enterprises decide to bring their own CDN, and there are certain reasons why they do that. So it can provide some enhanced security features like better flexibility, more integration options, ability to handle some specific business requirements, etc. But in terms of invalidation, like there is no difference. You either use TTL or you do custom invalidation requests. But one thing that is very interesting in this architecture setup is that whenever you bring your own CDN, you don't actually replace the Adobe out-of-the-box CDN, but you introduce a double CDN architecture. So then you need to decide if you want to use 2 CDNs, which can cause some problems if you do. because you need to think about like when is content invalidated where. So what I've seen mostly in practice, that in these cases, businesses decide that they want to use the bring your own CDN as the cache layer, and they keep the out-of-the-box CDN only as like for origin protection, so not for caching, but CDN does some other things besides just caching. It protects your dispatcher and AEM instances from attacks and DDoS and stuff like that. It can also serve as a fallback CDN. So if something happens to your primary CDN, you can always switch back to the Adobe CDN, but you can't get rid of it. It's part of the architecture and it's always there. Even if you bring your own CDN, that doesn't mean Adobe's Fastly goes away. And I think we can look at the last layer, which is the browser. On the next slide, yeah. And browser behaves similarly like CDN. It stores stuff locally on a user's device, so it doesn't have to re-download things all over, especially like, for example, images, but also HTML pages. It's going to respect the cache headers that it receives, but the main difference here is there is no way to clear and validate the cache on the client devices. So we need to be careful how we also deal with this layer. I already mentioned using ETAG header is a really nice optimization technique to not do too many unnecessary downloads. And I think I already explained it, so let's skip this part and jump to the conclusion. So what should you take out of this session? Hopefully some input on how to handle caching on different layers, and always in IT, like the answer is, it depends. So it's always like a balancing game between where you want to use TTL and where custom invalidation. I think it's best to really mix them where it makes sense. It's really good if you understand both of them, so you can tailor the approach to the specific website that you are building. So if you want a little bit more concrete advice, then I would say, since automatic cache flush is already implemented in Dispatcher, use it. It really, for me, doesn't make sense to use only TTL when this thing is already working out of the box. But also enabling TTL on Dispatcher really makes sense because it gives you more options. But then you need to really be careful about how you set your cache headers, because if you set the cache headers, then Dispatcher is also going to respect them. There is a little thing that causes a lot of pain, and that's if you are doing some kind of custom content referencing logic. And what I mean by that is, if you use like out of the box Adobe reference, let's say you reference a page to a content fragment or to an image or whatever, then AEM knows how to handle it and automatically like invalidates that content as well. But if you do like if you instruct your AEM backend team to do like a query, let's say we use a query to fetch, I don't know, certain content fragments with certain properties, right? Then that's something AEM doesn't understand. And then when you do a publication, it's going to clear the cache for the page, but it's not going to clear the cache for that reference content fragments. And this is where it can get really tricky. So be careful with that. And in those cases, TTL might be a better option. It's way more simpler to implement it with TTL. Regarding CDN, it's much easier to stick to TTL-based invalidation where you can, simply because custom developed cache invalidation with API calls is great, but it's also quite expensive to do. It takes a lot of development time. So basically, I would recommend it for certain pages that require quick delivery of the updated content, but not for everything. We don't really need it for everything. So yeah, I think with that, I'm done with my part. And then at the end, hopefully we have some time for questions.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was great. Some really great information in there. With that, I will pass it off to Angel, who is certainly a forms expert if I've ever met one. So Angel, I'll let you kick off.
Sure. So I'll just do a little intro. My name is Angel Taylor. I work for a company called PowerPoint, and I have been working with AEM Forms for almost 10 years now. I started off as a developer, and then I moved into more of a technical enablement kind of a role. And then now I'm somehow I got moved into the director of marketing role. So big jump there. My presentation, I'm going to try to keep it at the higher level, trying to give everybody just a broad overview of what AEM Forms is and how it plays well with the rest of the AEM solution. But if you have technical questions, I mean, feel free to put them in the chat. I can answer pretty much anything about forms. So I'm really excited to get into it. So from an agenda perspective, I just wanted to do a quick overview of what AEM is and what AEM Forms is. Then we'll move into how you can actually leverage AEM Forms with the different pieces. And then I want to give you an example with sites. If you guys want to let me know in the chat what parts of AEM you actually use, I'm assuming you're all using sites. But if you guys want to let me know if it's something different, I can try to change some of the messaging around to try to incorporate the pieces that you're using. You can move to the next slide, Wilson.
We still use paper forms. No,
Oh,
just
that kills me. So Adobe Experience Manager, if anybody was unaware, is actually a solution that contains multiple different modules. There's 5 different pieces in it, and they're all bundled within the title Adobe Experience Manager. And the idea is Adobe Experience Manager is a tool or a set of tools that allows you to create different content for personalized experiences. And the default one when people say, I use AEM, is they mean sites. And it makes sense. It's the tool that is used most often. It's the one that everybody is using to create their website. It's most recognizable. But the next one would be AEM Assets. And their team, if you start talking to them, when they say AEM, they mean assets. And what Assets does is it gives you a centralized location to be able to manage the different versions and the workflow approvals and things for the digital assets, which you can use within the rest of the solution. Again, most closely tied to sites, but you can also link it to forms, screens, and guides. That's the beauty of AEM, is they integrate so well together that you can use them asynchronously together, which is really powerful. So guides, just to give you a high level use of guides, think of like an online manual. If you bought like a bread maker, or we just bought a Ninja air fryer and they give you that little pamphlet, think of it like an online version of that. So it's not really super interactive. It's really static. But it's not really a form per se. It's got a very rigid format. That's what you can look at when you're talking about a guide. Now, screens is very interesting, and if you have a use case for it, it's absolutely an exciting tool to use. What it does is it happens to make content that spreads over multiple different screens or different screen resolutions. So I know AEM Sites and AEM Forms also adapt, but think like the Vegas Strip, since Adobe Summit is coming. Those big advertisements that you see, that's Adobe Screens. Or if you go to McDonald's and you use the interactive boards, Adobe Screens. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it is. It's a very niche market. It's really more for advertisement, but it's a very powerful tool in itself. And now I'm going to go into Forms. So we'll go into the next slide so you can see some of the features in Forms. So Forms in itself is a complete solution. It can do it all. It can let you create the content. It can help have portals for you to find the content. You can have full applications built within Forms. It's got a workflow engine to handle what happens when somebody hits submit. Where should this data go? How should it be handled? There's also different resolutions and screen variants that you can do to get whole omni-channel experience. There's different security parameters because a lot of people who use Form have to capture sensitive information, and we need to make sure that it's not only secure that nobody is taking that information, but also that we can identify who is actually opening the document, or that we knew it came from a particular sender. So everything is incorporated within AEM Forms, but that doesn't mean that people use AEM Forms for the entire solution. Everybody already has pieces of their business that it's already working. So what they do is usually bring AEM Forms to fill in a gap. They may replace a piece of it and integrate it with another solution. So I've seen AEM Forms sitting in front of like ServiceNow, Pegasystems, you name it, different databases, whatever. The idea is that it's handling a portion of the process, and then the workflow that you already have for your business is handling different portions of it. So it really comes down to what is your use case. And to do a quick summary, I did some benefits and some considerations for when you're trying to use AEM Forms. AEM Forms is very user-friendly. It's got a similar interface to sites. So you drag and drop and you can build out your form that way. And there is a robust library of components and widgets that you can use to build out your forms. You have the multi-channel output, so we can do print, web, mobile. The sky's the limit there. I like to think of AEM Forms as a anywhere, anytime, any place kind of solution for whatever your form's needs are. You have the real-time data validation, so you don't actually need to trigger something for the form to automatically start validating for you. Oftentimes when people are filling out forms, they're like copying things off of like other pieces of paper, like your driver's license or something, right? You're typing that in manually. Last thing you want is to get all the way to the end and figure out you missed a digit on your driver's license and have to go all the way to the back. So this will tell you in real time that this needs to be updated and that it's in the right format. It's got a centralized content management system, which is extended through the AEM Assets repository. But from a forms perspective, it's broken down into modular chunks so you can reuse pieces. And that's really a powerful part of AEM Forms. You create it once, just like you do experience fragments or content fragments, and you can leverage them within each other to build out a fuller story, like little Lego bricks. So for example, you can have an address block. And so then now you never need to recreate that address block. If for some reason you need to add some new element to it, you can update the address block and it cascades everywhere. But you can take that a step further and separate it based off of your departmental needs. Forms now have matured and they've put a lot of pressure on the forms development team to be able to handle a lot of things that never used to be a form's responsibility. Things like the look and feel of what a form is, or the IT connections, or the security behind them. Those things never used to be considered a forms developer's responsibility. And with AEM Forms, you're able to separate those. So just like you had those other Lego pieces for an address block, you can put all of the styling in its own special brand that is linked back. So now if you want to change your brand colors, your Adobe's not red anymore, Adobe's going to be blue. They can go in and just change that brand and it would cascade everywhere. So very powerful. It integrates with basically everything. It's an agnostic solution. I've seen it connect to all kinds of things. I've never seen anything where it couldn't connect. Sometimes it might need a little bit of extra stitching, but I've never seen any kind of problem where you weren't able to connect to it. The scalability to be able to move away from that one-to-one ratio. Oftentimes people have one version of a form for each language, each country, each state, each whatever. We don't do that anymore with forms. You have the intelligence built into the form, so when the data gets pushed into the form, it recognizes what things are relevant. You're from New York and you're from Florida, you guys get different terms of conditions once that page loads, rather than having to have two versions of that form. Secure submissions, again, we need to make sure that the content is secured at all times. There's a lot of sensitive information. Most of the people that I see using forms are usually in banking or government. Those are really big industries who are using AEM Forms. And I mean, they have sensitive information, so like it really needs to be locked down. But for considerations, I'd say the cost. A lot of people think that AEM Forms is just like a quick add-on to sites or any of the other pieces. It's its own enterprise solution, and it is a powerhouse. So there is an enterprise cost to it, and depending on your use case, I mean, it makes perfect sense. But if you're trying to use it for like a contact us form, it's like taking a limousine to go get milk. I mean, you can do it, but do you really want to, kind of thing. There is a level of complexity. Again, it's an enterprise kind of solution. And if you really want to take advantage of things like that centralized content and being able to separate out the responsibilities of the form development, it's a little bit complex to set up. There's an initial setup that needs to be done. But with anything, you can kind of expect that. Have your experts come in and build that piece for you. And so then your authors can just continue on their way. There's always going to be maintenance, but if you move your AEM instance to the cloud, then Adobe can help you with making sure things are up to date. But regardless of software, you're always going to have some maintenance. And there's always a training curve. I wouldn't like to think AEM Forms has a hard curve to learn, especially if you're already familiar with sites or assets, because it's all still within the same web browser experience. So it's not a huge curve, but there's still a curve. We'll move to the next slide. So I'm going to fly through this really quickly so we can go into the example I have. So here are the different pieces within the Adobe Experience platform, and I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of how they can integrate with the different AEM tools. So if you wanted to use AEM sites and AEM forms, I'd use it to enhance user interaction. Something along the lines of customer feedback, or if you want to put in an online application or something a little more tangible, a little bit meatier, you can build it in sites. Absolutely, you could build it in sites. The benefit of using forms is they already have some out-of-the-box functionality that you wouldn't have to rewrite. And because it's out of the box, as new versions come in, it's going to be maintained for you, versus if you wrote it in sites, then you would have to maintain it yourself. Because really under the hood, if I get a little bit technical, it all converts into HTML. So it doesn't really matter which tool you use. It's just some have different features that are better for others. I like to think of it as when you build stuff, and I'm not handy. I'm really not, but we did the basement ourselves recently, and there are so many different tools to cut, right? You got the hand saw, you got the little jigsaw, you got all kinds of things, and different tools make more sense depending on what you're doing. You can hack away at it and get it to work, but it would have been easier if you used the right tool, kind of thing. So AEM Assets, a great example that we did recently is a company did a rebrand, and they had to go back and change the logo on every single form. If you use the asset repository, it's always going to make sure that you're using the right asset. Interactive documentation, you can have AEM Forms set up almost like a little wizard, so you can go in and almost have it like a quiz even. You can have, how do you answer this? And depending on how they answered it, dynamically change, oh, you got this right, or no, you didn't. So you can have that kind of built-in training for you that you can do. Digital signage, again, think of like a review. You go into a hotel or something, and as you check out, they ask you, how was your stay? Was your room clean? Those kinds of things. You can have a form built into this fancy screen that's there for you. Personalization, making sure people get the right form at the right time. And you can link that in with Audience Manager as well, making sure that they're getting the right variant of the thing that they want. If you want a specific example, we could talk about if you're trying to get like a new credit card, right? And they'll look and they'll say, oh, well, we know you're a student, so here's a student offer for you. Here's the application for a new student line of credit or whatever it is. Having that kind of information, you can pull it in and make educated assumptions with your forms. And then data insights is one that I think is overlooked often, but if you have AEM Forms, I would get analytics. It's that constant feedback, right? Are people actually completing the form to come to the end? Are they dropping off? Are they having issues in certain sections? Are they taking too long to fill something out? Are they using the help that's built in? All that information helps you to build better, more personalized forms for your users. We'll jump into the last example here is a live use case. If you move to the next slide, Wilson. There's a live example that we just done recently. Dynamic personalized invoices on demand. So the idea here is that this was a Fortune 500 company who moved to a modernized forms framework. They were originally using that 1-to-1 ratio, and they were in 30 countries with 10 languages and 10 invoice variants. So like they could say, I didn't want to see records with a $0 amount, those kind of things. And so that they would have to have one version that would handle each one of those, and it didn't scale. And so they were moving their invoicing system to the cloud. So they decided this was an opportune moment to try to update their forms framework. So what we did is we went in and we helped modularize this so that way they were using that framework. But I want to point out the amount of flexibility that they had, because now what they did is when you go to their website, you go in and you select invoices because you've logged in, you're here to see your invoice. You can pick, let's say, you're in France, and so by default it's going to show you the France invoice in French with whatever your personal preferences were. But how about I don't want it in French? I want it in the France format, but I want it in English. So I can just on the fly click it and it would reload the form for me, and I can specify, do I want a print version? Do I want a web version of it? How do I want to handle? All of this is now available to them within their customer portal, which is online on the web, how AEM Forms can extend a web service application. They've actually now expanded. They're in 65 countries with 25 languages. So not only do they have a better user experience for their customers, but they're also having less maintenance and able to expand further. So this is the kind of things that you can do with forms that are what forms shine in. It's not the contact us form or that quick landing page that you need for a marketing activity. These are now beautiful, complicated, elegant solutions that sit on top of your website or in front of other applications that you have to be able to give personalized, dynamic experiences on the fly. And that was a whole lot of information that I threw at you guys. I just threw all of that out to you. And I hope you guys thought it was interesting or exciting. And if you guys have any questions, I think now is the time.
Awesome. Do we want to, Wilson, do we want to just go through these last slides really quickly and then just pass it to them?
For the time, I would like to go on the questions first. So that I don't want to rush if there's any questions. So do we have any questions to either Daniel or Angel on the forms or the caching?
Let's look.
I think we've got a couple in the chat. Yeah. Let's see.
There's one for Daniel. How do you see the impact of daily pods recycle on AEM AECS to overall cache site performance?
I don't see a really big impact because like when the pods recycle, it means you get a new fresh instance of AEM, you get a fresh instance of dispatcher. So of course that in that case, dispatcher cache is gonna be empty, but CDN cache will most probably not still be empty, right? So that should be still safe, and it's a good practice to recycle those pods. So I've seen like much more benefits than any problems with it.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
For Angel, it looks like from Sean, is there anything different on how to use forms in AEM versus EDS?
Okay. Yes is the fast answer. So there's a big difference between AEM, and I'm assuming this is AEM Forms and not just AEM sites, because AEM Forms can also render on Edge Delivery Service. AEM Forms has a slower rollout than some of the other AEM products. And so some of the features that you're trying to accomplish, you can't do in the newer versions. They are rolling them out now, the features, but so some of the things there will be lacking. I haven't looked recently what's currently been pushed all the way to the end, but if we're talking about Edge Delivery Services specifically, the thing with forms, when you start building these complex solutions, it's not the render time, right? The speed in which your form is rendering isn't as impactful as it is on a website. You really care about that lighthouse score on a sites page. On a forms page, when you're loading an entire application, yes, you want it to go fast, but it's not the rendering of the form that's going to take any time. It's the connections that you need to make for that form. If that form is integrating with another system, so that way you have accurate data of, let's say it was an inspection form and you're trying to look for a maintenance piece, you want to be able to have a direct link to that inventory. That direct link to your inventory is going to take time. So Edge Delivery was going to make the form load faster, sure, but depending on the complexity of that exists within your form, you're not really going to see a huge impact. At least today. It could change, but as it is today. Hope that answers the question.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yep. Any other question, guys?
There was one from Julia around how ServiceNow uses AEM Forms.
Okay, so AEM Forms sits in front of ServiceNow, and so the one use case that comes to my mind specifically that we did last year, what happened is they needed the form that was being used to capture the information to have information that was tied to different systems that ServiceNow didn't have access to. And so AEM Forms got to sit in its own separate place. and it was able to do the integrations that it needed. And so then it would convert that submission when they hit send that service to ServiceNow, which would create the ServiceNow ticket. But you can also push ServiceNow back to that ticket, so the person who originally launched it can open it up in their AEM Forms submission to be able to see that it was submitted and what the status is. So you do have that two-way. But really, it's an agnostic solution, and it's sky is the limit. It really comes down to what is your requirement, what do you need it to do. And generally speaking, the way most people use AEM Forms is for that presentation layer. So either you're capturing information or you're presenting information. The workflow engine is usually done by like ServiceNow or something else that somebody already has set up. We already have all the approvals and the stuff behind it. It's just easier and faster to go that way. Plus, trying to get organizations to change the way that they do business is always a challenge. But it works really well for that presentation layer.
Awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up here? All right. So
in the chat. Yep.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it. So just a quick plug here around the Skill Exchange at Summit. It's, in my opinion, one of the best areas to learn at Summit for the Summit sessions, because a lot of times it's really advanced users and people like champs, user group leaders that are a lot of times that are presenting on them. Wilson and I both presented there last year, but we've got two AEM champs that are speaking on Skill Exchange this year. So Krishna Kalyan Korthi is going to be speaking on manager security in the age of Gen AI. And then Martin Noble is going to be speaking on the power of the universal editor. So definitely going to be some great sessions there, and check out the other Skill Exchange sessions as well. Some other quick sessions. Wilson is also speaking again at the Community Pavilion, which is pretty exciting. So Wilson, you want to just speak to what your session's on real quick?
Yeah, it would be a little bit of overview with quick, like a TED talk, speak about marketing in the era of AI. So what companies are doing and what to expect with all the buzzwords of AI out there.
Awesome.
And you?
Well, so mine is a little bit up in the air as to whether I'm going to be participating in it. I kind of got asked at the last minute, but what it will be around is kind of around improving content supply chain and utilizing Gen AI with some new experience features that they're going to be implementing and they're going to be unveiling at Summit. So whether I'm on it or not, definitely check out this session. I think it's going to be a really interesting feature. And it's going to help a lot of people, including would have helped us as well. So yeah, definitely check out all the sessions, and thank you guys, and thank you so much to our speakers, to Daniel and Angel today. And yeah, sign up for our user group if you want to continue to attend these sessions. We're going to try to do it about once a quarter, and we'll have some other speakers and great topics coming up.
And thank you. And then you should receive, we'll see if we can put like some feedback email. Promise it may not be use the AEM Forms to get the feedback, but it's most likely be a Survey Monkey, just to get a feedback on how it was and what type of the topics that people want to hear. And like I said, if we have a good, I saw on the list of attendees, folks in Nashville, some in Atlanta, maybe the next one we do in Atlanta, and the following one we'll do in Nashville, or we do another virtual one. But yeah, we're right on time. Give people a break to get to there 1 p.m. or whatever time it is next to where you are located. So, but thanks for everybody to attend here. I appreciate it. And Mary, thanks for putting this together. It was awesome. And thank you, Daniel and Angel, for spending time and dedicating to share with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.